Hi, you are watching SightsIn Plus and this is Romesh Shivastu. Please do subscribe the channel for the HR news, for HR updates and conversation with the top-notch CHROs, thought leaders and business heads. Today we will try to dive deep background verification. If you know, last year many companies, many IT companies, they have fired a huge number of employees, you can say like Cognizant, like Accenture, Wipro, and the reason was because the employees failed in background verification. And also, when you resign from a company and try to join another company, so background verification, that is a must process. People try to understand that what is the background verification, what is exactly the process, what are the key components which are being considered in this background verification process. We have two senior panelists. Let me welcome Ms. Pooja Tiwari. She is head people and culture at OnGrid, and Mr. Ganesh Iyer is a senior director human resources at ADP India. Ganesh, I would like to come to you first. So according to you, what is the background verification process? And what are the generally, broadly, what are the key components generally we consider for the background verification?
We all started our careers a couple of years ago. I'm sure everyone feels that at some point you would have experienced what's a background verification. Today, in fact, educational institutions are pursuing background verification. Corporations have been using this kind of a particular trend for several years. But I think to put it in a nutshell, it's a verification of your prior credentials, historical career jobs that you have pursued, and somewhere down the line, it is to verify whether you were in that role, you were in that organization, you were in that specific tenure that you fulfilled or have showcased in your resume to a potential employer or to a verifying agency. In a nutshell, there are two or three elements in a background verification. You do address verification. I'm not sure if it is still done, but it was being done at least some time ago. There is criminal record verification for specific job profiles where you need to make sure that there is no kind of criminal association and background. And third is your employer verification, which is for your prior role, and it can lead up to right from your first employer in some kind of potential senior level roles. Those are the three that I clearly remember, plus education, which is verification through your university and records. Because today in the digital world, you might be pursuing a course somewhere, but you showcase in some other form. So it's the authentication of any kind of information you have represented on your resume.
Pooja, what is your take on this? And if you can also share what is the importance of this, the background verification, and how do you start? Also, that is also very important. How do you start the verification process?
Yeah, Ramesh, definitely I agree with the Ganesh point because background verification is very, very important, objective these days in the organization, and it should be must be required also. Of course, adding to that point, background verification is actually needing for, different levels. For example, when we have a full-time employee, that has a different type of approach we use. When we have an intern, we have a different type of approach. And people, when we have a, blue-collar employees, approach is different altogether accordingly. So checks varies and changes accordingly based on the job roles as well, based on the profile what we play. And sometimes it's also depending on the organization to organization as well. But yes, I'd say definitely the most popular checks are education and employment is also there. ID proof checks are also be there. These days criminal checks, which has a various different categories like police verification, code verification is also be there. Along with that, definitely it's also part of it. These days are coming up with global checks as well as the social media checks are also be part of it. So there are multiple checks are there depending on organization to organization. They choose their requirement and they proceed with this. Adding to one more point here, some organizations are also prefer to do that pre-employment check and post-employment checks also, because pre-employment checks will give a very quick results, to post screening and before using the offer letter, and post will take a little bit more time slots over there. So this has a different altogether working for this. But how we start this? See, background verification process when we start is actually very important. We should have a first important thing is consent to the candidate, whether it's a pre-employment, whether it's a post-employment. Its consent is very, very important for that because it has a multiple objective toward, because we are using certain important credential of the candidate and employee to taking the background verification. For example, Aadhaar. It's a very important, document. So taking that and then verifying something, it's very important to have a consent, and also Adding to that point, it's also consented ki, okay, we are using your private data to understand everything is right in what direction as well. So the process start with the, with the consent. Definitely, there are a number of parameters towards it, and post that there is a, some things are online available, some checks are offline available. Like in my company, everything is online. We have a digitization, everything. So everything is online. So people can easily update each and every records in a just a click basis itself, and post that how we proceed further for the verification, and report will add an outcome as a report. It will go to the employer. So then based on their policy, they will see okay, what are the results or what are the outcome, and what are the procedures they have with the company. They can follow the process accordingly. So this is the background verification and how this gonna be start and how we proceed usually. So that's my take with you.
And Ganesh, how do you start this background verification process in your organization?
So I'm in a global role, and clearly, we have different principles and policies and practices. I can definitely tell you, being outside of India, there are multiple differences in background verification because one, the biggest rule of thumb that people use is data privacy. How you're going to use this data, where you're going to use this data, for what relevance and what purposes. And each country has this own legislation, law that you have to abide by. While there are multiple firms which are globally recognized as top employment background verification agencies, I think the rules of the game do not change much. To give you an example, you are collecting some level of information, sourcing some level of information from every candidate who comes and meets with you. Is part of the screening round, is part of your funneling round, is part of your interaction. So at that particular point in time, you're expecting the candidate to submit some details on the HRIS platform, right? Where you enter your data as a candidate, even before like you express your desire as a potential candidate for a job. So that's stage one. Stage two, once you're starting with your interactions, you're already fulfilling some level of details like your existing compensation, your existing title, what's your job role, and your address, so on and so forth. So screening is not done until and unless you reach a stage where the employer starts feeling there is some level of potential promise on this candidate. Because see, it's all cost. Ultimately, when you have to exchange this information with a background verification agency, or you call it BGV agencies in a short form, you have to provide some level of cost. And each and every background verification is pretty expensive because it's a laborious, time-consuming process, reaching out to different agencies, reaching out to different institutions. So no matter which stage of the interview process the candidate is, prior to onboarding, you definitely do a pre-screening, which is to verify, which would necessarily not touch upon the existing employer because that can really, spin the interaction process out of control. But you would interact about prior employers than your current employer, especially if you carry multiple years of experience. And to showcase that you are, let's say, you are legally authorized to work in the country, you do not have any kind of criminal proceedings, etc. Especially if you take fintech roles and all, criminal background verification is very critical because you are supposed to meet certain guidelines of offering services to your clients or wherever they perform the job duties. In any one of this, pre-screening, post-screening, yeah, the thorough verification of a candidate happens from the time an offer is extended to the time when the candidate comes on board. And this duration is actually called the buffer period, where the employer prepares any kind of onboarding activities, making sure that the candidate has the ability to serve the notice, and also include the existing employer as part of the verification process. So while there are various stages, I can tell you when I started my career, I think it was much more because within background verification, you have advanced background verifications, sub-advanced, and of course, basic background verification. Even today, if you approach a agency as an HR organization, they will ask you what kind of catalog of service would you like to enroll in. And depending on the job role, you have to define whether this is A, B, or C, or you have to do, like, you're hiring senior executives. In those scenarios, the background verification can easily take up to 90 days too, because you want to make sure. But today, that process is changing. I think with more and more digitization coming in, more technology-driven approach coming in, the process time period is getting shortened, but the information is becoming far more impactful because everything is on internet, right? You're able to go and source this information at a quicker, faster pace. So those are a couple of thoughts about how the current process runs. But in all of this, the candidate is informed. The candidate is taken well along, saying, we are going to perform this. Are you okay with this? Shall we begin? I think in each stage, the consent-driven approach is critical.
Right. Thank you, Ganesh. Pooja, how the agencies work when we talk about the background verification process? So that goes on the case basis. You already have certain data that suppose you have the application for a candidate, and you can quickly already that is in your database, and you can quickly let the company know that these are the red flags on this candidate. So this is the one. Second, with the technology, how the background verification is evolved. I would like to know from you.
Definitely. Actually, Ganesh has already rightly said, like technology has already, shortened the time period for the, background checks. Earlier days, it was a huge, manual forms. Then we store manual forms, read manual forms, and then we submit the manual forms to, agency. And then record keeping data was separately managed, all these stuff. But now everything is digitized. So, and everything is quick basis. And it's very easy. Like one is a shorter time period, but second is a user friendly portals as well, and techniques as well. So everything is very quick, fast, reliable, as well as the results are outcomes are very, very fast as well. So if I say a few checks are, I think so these days you can also run in within less than 24 hours, less than 4 hours, also depend upon the stages of the what the checks is needed. So, and within, I think so, 1 or 2 days, you have your complete background reports check, or a complete report as well, subject to which are the checks, which are the authentication required by the organization to organization. But yes, this is very fast moving, process. And these days, that's only the reason hiring basis of that is decision making is also very fast towards that as well. So that's the technology impact on a BGV.
Right. Pooja, Ganesh has also highlighted about some legitimacy part of this. So you need, the consent before you start the process of background verification. So sometimes this data privacy and data, right to privacy, that can also intersect with the, background verification process. So how do you deal with this situation?
So definitely, if we have a that is very important piece. But when we have a you must be heard about there is an agreement terminology usually we use. Every corporate, whenever they sign with any of the BGV agency, they have a certain agreement clauses to sign to between mutual parties with each other. And in that, this clause are these days applicable or mandatory by each and every employer. So every corporate using these terminologies, and basis of that, the data privacy are very, very important. They also have an NDA to be signed with each other, and those NDA has a specific clauses. And if there is no, things are going in a wrong direction, of course, there is a certain other parameters are also come into the picture. But yes, that's very important piece, privacy and NDA as well as consent. These are very important aspects these days. Yeah.
Ganesh would like to share your opinion on this legal framework part.
Yeah, I think for domestic residents, I think it's still, I would say, it's much simpler, much faster, much quicker. Today, I think with the global expatriate movement happening across the world, you're not bound by operating with talent within the country. A lot of people who are non-residents come from different countries, are legally authorized to work in countries of which are not their primary citizenships. So it makes a lot of change, especially when you approach candidates and when you operate in that kind of a framework, working with domestic non-residents and expatriates. You need to be fully aware. So I think legal and legal COEs, legal teams within the enterprise also plays a very crucial role. And I think I should mention the call out that anything that HR functions today do while partnering, all of these frameworks needs to have thorough evaluation by the legal teams, no matter your legal teams exist within your enterprise or outside. I think they need to give you a consent saying, yes, you are operating within a certain framework, within a certain model, which would not create any kind of a liability or risk in future. In addition to this, I think when we are talking about the ground principles, I think today with the advent of technologies being available, I think companies have also started to think, do we really need this process? And to what extent do you need this process? Because earlier this was like one size fits all. I think that has definitely evolved in the last half a decade. And to Pooja's point, yes, recruitment has become faster because of this, because this started becoming somewhere like a choking point for talent acquisition teams. And the primary reason is because the time duration taken for a background check was significantly long, sometimes 40 days, sometimes 30 days, sometimes no response, right? Because this is all driven by the responsiveness of the requester, uh, uh, responsiveness of institutions, responsiveness of corporates agreeing to it. But luckily, what's happening is with more data being available, you do not have to do redundant checks time and again. Because today, for example, if candidate X is going to 4 different employers, all 4 of them are actually investing time. Instead of doing that individually, what they have started doing is go to one central agency which is able to verify the proof of records, which might have been less than 6 months ago. So data purging, redundancy of data, etc., also plays a very pivotal role in background verification. So companies are rethinking, reimagining the possibilities. Background verification agencies are coming up with informations that are available at companies' disposal, not just through a report. Earlier, this used to be a PDF report, etc. Now, this has become a much more intense data, which is available. And when I say data, this is data available and which resides in your HR systems of record, so that this can be used in future. And companies also have to, at some point, exchange this information with potential employers in future, right, where their existing employees are going to. So they are also able to respond much more quicker. So I think the maintenance and the whole simplification of data has led to a very different theory about how background verification was done and how it should continue to get simplified. I think in the coming years, it's just going to continue to become more and more simplified with technology.
Ganesh, right now, technology, we are also in era of social media right now. So do you see there is also role of social media in the background verification somehow?
I think all the HR professionals across the world read this news, right? That you do not want to have a bias in your recruitment process. While I'm a big believer that whatever is in the resume, go after it. And of course, there are various ways in which you can very transparently ask a candidate whether there are details that they would like to provide to us. And I think people value that information in a trustworthy basis so that you don't use it against them or towards their recruitment process. I find it difficult when people say, hey, we leverage some level of social media verification as part of a recruitment, because quite honestly, I think that's what's happening in their personal life. I don't think you should premise the whole recruitment based on what he or she does outside of work. That's the line that you need to draw on sand and say that this is work related, this is outside of work. But yes, there are some roles where you would prefer to do that, so that you are able to identify some behavioral patterns, some patterns that, okay, you are not somebody who goes and trolls people, etc. Especially if you're like a good social media influencer, and if you need to do a background verification, you need to have a thorough knowledge about that person. But I don't think in corporate roles you need to do, because anyone who has a professional journey would predominantly be on LinkedIn, not many other social media sites. And I find no matter what verification you do, it's a human assessment of that verification or that information that is coming through. So don't use social media verification to interpret your own theories. I think it's an information that's available to you, but don't try to premise your recruitment outcomes depending on that.
And sometimes also the social media verification is not as much authentic. So that is always a question mark. This is, true information or not. Pooja, what is your take on this?
I wanted to add 2 points here. One is like a social media checks. Actually, sometimes it's helpful, and sometimes actually we need to be not to be biased. Agree with Ganesh point. The first, it's like, for example, sometimes we, as a person, we sometimes write information over our social media platform, which is helpful for us to enter into certain interviews process. For example, I say LinkedIn. So in LinkedIn, maybe I have updated certain information, but my tenure is mentioned over in the LinkedIn is something else. But when I appear in the interview, I submitted my record something else. So this will be also trigger point when you can, match the duration of employment or tenure in the employment or, certain information. So in that way, this is actually helpful for the, employer, and they can cross question to the candidate what is the information mentioned over a social media versus what is the information they're presenting at the time of interview process. So this is one way it's helpful. Now coming to the second point about the other social media channel, where it's my personal level itself, where it's nowhere connected with my professional parameters. So in that case, we definitely these days employer definitely look into like how they are involved into the social media. Hope so they are not mentioning or trolling anybody else, which is impact to their brand actually. So some of the companies definitely look into that area, but not widely used. But yes, people usually look into, and some of the employers definitely look into social media, checks as well. We definitely have certain checks along with us as well. So basis of that, people prefer to have a social media, and of course, preferring to branding. Everybody want to protect the brand. Of course, parallelly, they also wanted to employees should also be protected. Looking into that angle, these things are coming up actually.
Yeah, if I may just add one perspective, and sorry to come up with this late thought. I think oftentimes in the candidate form, these are non-mandatory fields. It's completely left to the candidate's consent, and especially when you're starting a career, you feel like I should provide every information out there. Not necessary. You need to have the balancing act. Whether you need to provide your Instagram ID, whether you need to provide your Facebook ID. I think LinkedIn is great because today it's a professional platform. Let's continue to retain it, and employers would prefer to use that. But other than that, I don't feel there is a need for you. Yeah, if you have a job, if you have your own website, share that, because I think that companies would love to have the creative side of you being aware, understanding about whether you have done some level of creative work outside of your regular scope of work. That's definitely proof of pudding. But other than that, I find some of the information that you need to provide or do not have to provide, if candidates provide, and then it can also be held accountable. Yeah.
Ganesh, I think it is very important to discuss that what are the consequences if you failed the background verification. So, generally, how do you deal with this situation if the background verification is failed?
A lot of HR professionals and managers at some stage of your career, you would have dealt with difficult situations. As part of background verification, sometimes when the information doesn't match clearly, the first stage is that you need to offer, rather than taking action. I think you need to reflect upon what has happened and provide an opportunity. Nobody is doing this intentionally. Sometimes it could be a genuine error. Sometimes it could be a mistake. And as Pooja was saying, it could just be sheer lack of attention when you're filling up the forms. And I've dealt with all the scenarios in my own experience. But giving an opportunity for the person to respond, enabling them with your trust, because see, when you have invested 60 to 90 days of interviewing process, multiple people putting in efforts, you do not want the candidate or the employee to fail. You want the person to remain successful, you want the role to get fulfilled, and you want the person to perform. Those are the three guiding practices, right? And ultimately, if a situation like this arises, let's say the university is not found to be deemed, has not been affiliated, your employer has not given consent, there has been no responsiveness, that could lead to different stages of conversations with the potential employee, making it in a tough spot. And nobody prefers to have that kind of a mental stress in their career. I think, especially in the early years, people become very nervous. People start fumbling. People would say things that they do not mean. So it's important as an employer, showcase that trust, showcase that interaction where you are saying, okay, we want to give you one more opportunity. We want to understand about the consequences. Did you understand when you signed the contract that any kind of information that's misrepresented can lead to consequences, so on and so forth. I think once the candidate acknowledges this, asking them openly and getting through another round of verification. I know of many employers, and even today, I think it's a thumb rule, that they would reinitiate another background verification based on the information that's been found as invalid. And if that is the case, you need to do that, because if the candidate says, hey, sorry, I don't think there is anything which is misrepresented, it's just that probably a background verification agency, and trust me, I've seen this many a times, background verification agencies come back with a completely different report. So errors happen. It's human nature, because and that is the reason why a lot of that human driven process has become a tech driven process, because sometimes humans make mistake. It could be a mere interaction, an email, etc. But yeah, there are tough situations too when you have to let go of an employee, and that has consequences and ramifications both on the employer as well as the employee. But in scenarios where people fail background verifications, clearly that leads to severe steps and actions, up to and including termination, that employers do. But in many scenarios, there is a conversation, and then there is a consent, and then again you reinitiate another level of checks and balance.
Right, and I think it also depends that which information is found wrong. So that also matters most. Pooja, what is your take on this when we talk about the consequences in case your background verification is failed?
Yes, Ramesh, definitely it's always be a difficult situation whenever this type of situation come into the picture. Decision definitely, last decision, everybody knows, okay, what is the outcome, but it's rightly, as Ganesh said, opportunities. Opportunity is very important part when we give it to the, employee or candidate. It's also matter, maybe one thing which is not mentioned anywhere, but of course, as a human, we try to understand that okay, what is the intent behind it? Whether it's intentionally given certain information or whether unintentionally given some, whether there's a person having a role play towards it or whether they don't have any role towards it. And certain situations, whenever they fall into certain things and certain things are coming on negative, whether they are into willfully willful is there, or maybe certain situation has happened, they have to be get involved towards it. So it's all depend upon it's all comes with the conversation, all comes with the opportunity. When we ask for the clarification, then before taking a decision, I think so it's very important to ask for the clarification from the respective person. The person will give you the clarification, then accordingly you will take a decision whether what next procedure needs to do. If not, I think so. Last is, of course, let go the person or maybe termination. I think so. Before that, also there are certain situation will come into the picture where decision can be with the mutual assessment. One more point is very important here is to understand the criticality of that situation. What has came into the picture. For example, if something negative has come, which is related to something sexual harassment or related certain thing. I think so. Those things is very, very important where organization also has to think what is the final decision. It's required to be a discussion, clarification, or with the straightforward decision making also. So it depends, but yes, consequences will be there. And this comes with the either we can give a clarification or asking a mutual agreement, or certain can be go ahead with the respective based on the company policies as well.
Ganesh, I think we have been able to discuss all the important aspects of this background verification. Anything else would like to share?
I'm not sure if we have not covered anything, but I think the trends in the talent market are changing a lot. It's becoming more and more digital. It's an era of digital. Clearly, I don't think anyone prefers to have any information where I don't remember any more companies or enterprises using papers and pen any longer, or expecting candidates to fill this information and then expecting digital verification companies to provide this information in the form of a verification report. When I started my career back in 2006, I very well remember my background verification of that first firm actually came in the form of a courier. That was how it was. Today, it's completely changed. It's fully digital. It's actually authenticated by firms and comes and resides in your HRIS system. It's become far more seamless, and that's what is the power of technology. So if you do not do that, the preferences move towards it. I think the second is it's a very critical tool. I would never shy away from saying it. It's a very essential tool because even today, out of let's say 100 candidates that you hire, probably 95 pass through and 5% do not because of this. So it's a great check and balance tool for any corporation. However, I think the using it in a very meritorious way, using it for the right purposes, and using it, making it an enabler rather than becoming a bottleneck is very critical. So I think that shift in mindset is very important. Why do you use it? How much do you use it? And are we spending the right amount of money in procuring the information? Because some companies spend, like, for example, 50 euros to 100 euros per background verification. But do they really use it? Besides having a check and balancing, yes, verified, the person has worked in so and so firm. So you need to know which roles are you doing it for, what are the consequences, what are the benefits, and do it for those roles where there is meaningful outcomes. Instead of those where you find, okay, just a simple background verification should be sufficient. So I think now I've noticed a big change in the shift of companies thinking about, we need to have a simple background verification that gets the candidate quickly inside the organization and fulfills the minimum requirement, legally protects us. Vis-a-vis for some niche roles, you might require a far more detailed information. So I think that's where the whole conversation is starting to move towards.
Pooja, quickly, if you want to add something as a final comment.
I think so. Very important BGV process, because it's a. If I have just read, few days before, there is one article on moonlighting, also an article on it was there how much attrition has been reported long back. So it's around, it's a big shift based on that BGV reports, based on BGV checks. Apart from that, I think so this is also very important, like because of technology intervention, it's a very fast moving product, very fast moving things are there. And secondly, I think so the next which is upcoming is also like Now pre and post joining is also managed. Now I think so post exit is also upcoming on a technology side. That is also a very important aspect. So this is overall umbrella services right now these days every corporate wants, and it's going very, very beautifully. Yeah.
Thank you, Ganesh and Pooja, for joining the session and sharing your wonderful thoughts. Thank you so much.